Kiddushin daf chav daled. How's everybody doing? Welcome to the 8-minute daf. The halacha is that if you have produce, first you give truma, then you give meiser, and whatever's left over, you take 10% of that and you give it to yourself. You take the fruit, you bring it to Yerushalayim, eat in Yerushalayim. But what if you have too many fruit? So you transfer the gedusha of the fruit of the meiser sheni into money. If the fruit is owned by you and you're doing that transfer, you must add 25%. The Gemara calls it a chaymish. If you're somebody else, doing it for somebody else, a friend, you're not mechuyev to bring a chaymish. What about a wife? So Gemara tells us that a wife who's paida, she transfers the gedusha of the meiser sheni into money of her husband, and she uses her husband's money. She's just a shliach, and of course she must add a chaymish as if the husband did it. If it's hers, her money, she has money from nichsim malug, she doesn't have to add the chaymish. And if they gave her money on condition that your husband doesn't have rishus in the money, it's supposed to go directly for the transfer. According to her mayor, she has to add a chaymish because the money is the husband's, and according to Chachamim, she doesn't have to. What if the woman inherited meiser sheni? According to her mayor, meiser sheni is considered mam gavaya. It's hegdish. The Torah permits you to eat from it, but it's not yours personally. For instance, you can't take that fruit and be mekadosh a woman with it. So therefore, it's not considered the husband's. And if she's paida with his money, then the halacha is she doesn't have to add a chaymish. According to Chachamim, she would have to add a chaymish. The Torah tells us in two psukim that a slave, a eved knani, whose tooth is knocked out or eye is knocked out, goes out l'cheres. Typically, when you have two psukim teaching us the same thing, you can't learn anywhere else. The Torah is saying dafka in these two psukim, unless, of course, if it's in one pasuk, then the Torah is saying take that one pasuk, teach it to everywhere else. But in our case, since these two psukim, you need each one. There's a chiddush in the shen, and we learn it from the ayin, that even though the tooth wasn't born with him, a person is not born with teeth usually, nevertheless, if you knock that tooth out, you go out free. And the other chiddush is that a baby tooth, if it's knocked out, you don't go out l'cheres with that. And the Gemara tells us there's something called a klal pratu klal, and there's something very similar called a ribui miut ribui. They operate very, very similarly, but they have different outcomes. And the Gemara says l'maskana. We're going to learn from a ribui miut ribui that from the final word yishalchenu, that any aver, any limb that's in the open, and even if it's a limb that there's no bitul malacha, in other words, it doesn't cause the slave to stop working. For instance, the bone under the beard, if the master yanks his beard and dislocates that bone, even in such a case, the slave goes out l'cheres. And from the words shen v'ayin, the Gemara is memayit, let's say a hand that shrivels, but it eventually is going to come back to its original power. That's the only thing that a slave doesn't go out with. The Gemara brings a huge machlokes. This slave that goes out because his eye or tooth were poked out, does it require get shichur or not? There's tanaim that say yes, there's tanaim that say not. According to Reb Shimon, you need to get shichur because he brings Gzeir Shava, the word shiluach, from a regular woman. According to Reb Meir, chavshi, it says the word chavshi, go out free before yishalchenu, and therefore you don't require a get shichur, you go out free. And the word yishalchenu, says Reb Meir, comes to teach us that all Rashi Yevarim, if you go out with the Rashi Yevarim, you're not required to have a get shichur. The Machriim, they say, they make a pshara. When it comes to shen v'ayin, which is mefurish in the Torah, you don't need a get shichur because the Torah says he goes out just as so. But all the other Yevarim require get shichur. If a person who's the master hits a slave on his eye or the ear, and now he can't use the eye or the ear, he goes out l'cheirus. If he just created noise, he banged on the wall, he made a huge noise that caused the slave to have trauma, and that trauma made him blind or deaf, that's something that's within the person to control. And therefore, it's only a grama min zaken pater, and he does not go out l'cheirus. Because typically, somebody who's mazik in that kind of way, he would be pater min dinei adam and chay b'dinei shamayim. Because a person gets scared on his own. The Gemara tells us if a slave started out with 100% vision, and the master knocked out 80%, he still has a little, somewhat vision, you don't go out l'cheirus. The same thing with the tooth. And the same halacha, but slightly different, is that if the slave started out with only 20% vision, and the master knocked out that 20%, he goes free. If the master knocked out an eye that he can't see with it at all, yaitz l'cheirus, because we see that that's a mum, it's considered a mum by a bird. If the master is the doctor and he's trying to help the slave, he's filling a cavity and knocked out his tooth, there's machlokes if the slave goes out or not. But if the master didn't intend at all, let's say to even touch the eye, according to everybody, it doesn't go out l'cheiros. The Gemara brings an example. If the master was helping the slave give birth, and during the childbirth he poked the eye out, since there's zero kavana for the eye, he's potter. A chicken who created a large noise and broke a glass vessel, so according to MinDaf that says Sroyer is Mishalim Nezek Shalom, he would have to pay Nezek Shalom. The Gemara brings another brisa of a donkey or a horse that made a loud noise, and they also broke vessels. They only have to pay a half a Nezek because that goes according to MinDaf that says Sroyer is Chatzi Nezek. Rabbi Isai, have a wonderful day.